everyone, and thank you very much for joining tonight's Ruby Talk. My name is Kitumetse Biko. I am from South Africa. I was born in Johannesburg and grew up in a place called Mabisikral in the Northwest Province. I'm about almost 30 years old, so I'm still a bit of a young one. But I grew up in a rural area in South Africa, so I'm one of those people who does not come from a privileged background. I grew up poor, like a majority of Black South Africans. But I was one of those who was so-called intelligent. I've only, it was very disappointing to discover that I was only good at regurgitation. Because when you are at school and you are able to get those high marks, you think you are smart. And then once you discover what real education and knowledge is, when you grow up, you realize that you were only good at regurgitation. But I'm glad I discovered that at an early stage in my life, and I was able to seek real knowledge that would free my mind and would be putting me in a foundation and a place in my life where I could create the life that I want to live instead of follow the rules that were set by people who don't understand the circumstances that I come from. So I finished high school at the top of my class, and I was able to go to the top university in the African continent, the University of Cape Town, where I studied economics and economic history. Now, so like saying I'm an economist, I don't like being called that because I find them very useless, and you will find out why. I prefer calling myself a monetary historian because that is actually where my passion lies. I bumped into this economic history subject by mistake when I was in varsity, and I fell in love with it. It was the only, apart from maths, it's the only, I think, the only useful course one can pay money for at university because it really teaches you about something that a majority of people go to school and never learn about, which is money, right? Which is the reason why we are here today. The majority of people actually think they know what money is because we walk around the world with an assumption in our mind that we know what money is. So today we just want to demystify the subject of money, get to the crux of understanding what it actually is and why it's important for you to know and understand the difference between money and currency, because we are living in a very, very fascinating period in the history of humankind. And by the end of this presentation, you will understand why I'm saying that. So I finished university with my qualification, and then I discovered this Bitcoin thing during my studies when I was writing thesis, and I was looking into this space called fintech, because my interest has always been to go into banks and know how money works. I know you might know the movie called The Pursuit of Happiness. That's what inspired my path in life. That gentleman who was streets with his child, looking to go into the banking sector so that he can become an investment manager and then be one of those people who creates wealth. I saw that as a story that was relating to me, and therefore that's the passion that I had where I was attempting to go towards that route, which is why I studied what I studied and which is why I was interested in the subject matters that I was in. So I discovered going through YouTube one night, it was about February, March of the year 2016 or 17, I'm not sure. And I bumped into a video that was explaining blockchain. They didn't even write the topic as Bitcoin because there are people who back in the day used to have a problem with Bitcoin. So they used to like talking about blockchain. In the beginning, people did not understand Bitcoin. That's why they opted to talk about blockchain instead of Bitcoin. But these days, people are not mistaken which one is the actual asset that we should be focusing on. So I bumped into this thing. I watched it as well. It's about 22 minutes, 25 minutes long. I tell you now, from that day, my life has never been the same. Understand that I actually have a knowledge of money and how the world works. My understanding of where we stand and where we need to go is that we are at the mercy of governments because there's no alternative option for us. We have to do what the government says we must do. We have to use the resources that they avail to us so that we can pursue the lives that we need to pursue. And then I bump into this thing. I'm a big freedom guy. I come from the era of university children who wanted to decolonize the education system, who wanted free education. People who were very much aware of the environment that we come from and very much aware that we were still disadvantaged where we were. So we were seeking a better future for ourselves. And we wanted to relieve the burden of our parents who don't have money and to pay for our schooling, which did not guarantee us jobs. So I already had that mentality in my life and I was seeking out. I think that's one of the things that the universe used to attract Bitcoin to me, because I was seeking out ways that I can participate in giving value to people using the knowledge that I have. So Bitcoin became that for me. So I discovered it and I went crazy. I couldn't sleep for a very long time. I stopped going to campus. I stopped going to work for a while because I was just reading up on it, consuming everything that I could consume about it, reading everyone, watching everyone, and understanding that this is a revolution. Because when you understand it, from a person who already has an understanding, a basic understanding of economics and money, you can't believe it. You probably have to go over and over the white paper, over the videos for about a month until you are like, okay, so this thing really exists. Like we finally were able to create a freedom system, right? Then once that settles in your mind, you do everything in your power to be a part of it. So I looked at it and I was like, I'm in South Africa. I don't have money. I can't get a broker in the United States of America to help me participate in this Bitcoin space. So what alternative ways are there to participate? Started ravaging through social media. And then eventually one day, someone reached out to a colleague of mine on Facebook about a Bitcoin presentation of network marketing. I was like, say no more. I don't care what it involves. As long as they said Bitcoin, I'm going. I want to hear what they're talking about. If it can allow me to participate, I'm definitely getting in there with everything that I have. So we went to the presentation. It was a network marketing opportunity. And we met very lovely people. Tabang Sinuane is one of the people that you guys know and understand. He was the one who was presenting this, and me and him have become friends since then because we bonded over this subject matter. We understood what it meant for us, what it meant for people in general, especially people coming from a very disadvantaged continent like the African continent. You will understand as I continue to explain this subject matter that it may be important to some extent to people who are in developed nations, but it's a matter of life and death who live in third world. And I'll give you an example because we already have examples of that, certain nations that are going through that. So that was a brief introduction of myself and who I am and how I got to be interested in the space of Bitcoin. So now I'm just going to go into a bit of and into money. And I'm going to term it money versus currency. And I hope that from today, you understand very well that there is a difference. It is very important for you to understand that there is a difference and then understand what that difference is and understand the impact that it has in your life. Understanding. So money is something that we know that we use on a day-to-day basis. We do everything, we exchange our time to earn the money that we need so that we can buy goods and services that we use on a day-to-day basis in our lives, right? It's a concept that comes from a very, very long time ago, and it started with the barter system, where people used to exchange goods that they had for goods that they did not have. And then as commerce started growing and trading started developing at a rapid pace, people needed more portable ways of exchanging value. So when you wanted to trade, some of you might know the Mapungubwe, the place in Limpopo that is called Mapungubwe. They are one of the first vendor people, are one of the first people to ever do long-term trade with the Chinese back in the day, right? So when you did the trade, for example, when you took iron from Mapungubwe and you traded it against something, shells from China, you couldn't take cows from Mapungubwe and exchange them for whatever the Chinese were giving you in China. So people started developing more better ways, more efficient ways, more portable ways of doing the exchange and the trade between themselves. That's how the development and the evolution of money started happening. Right. Now, I want you to capture a very important and critical piece in this narrative before we go any further. There was no government involved. There was no bank involved. There was no third party, right? Whoever had the iron that they were trading connected with the merchant that they were dealing with, or the trader, the Arab traders that were the ones going up and down, taking goods from different places. I give you what I give you, you give me what you give me in exchange for what I'm giving you, and we move on with our lives. There's no one in between who we are paying or who's taking a fee or who's taking commission for us to complete this transaction. This is where the following concept of money being a public good comes. It's very important to understand that again for further along the presentation so that you know where we are today. Money is a public good. It's not a private good, or at least it's not supposed to be a private good. It's a public good that belongs to the citizens of the nation that they can use to exchange value with each other, right? So that happened, and then it continued to develop over and over again. And then we saw civilizations like the Egyptian civilization coming up, the Sudanese, the Malians. Most of those people started building civilizations that became larger and larger with larger populations. And therefore, they started increasing the frequency that they traded, the frequency that they did economics with each other and with other countries. So then in Egypt, about 5,000, 5,500 years ago, they started using gold and silver as money, right? It wasn't perfect money at the time because, I mean, for example, the coins would be different in sizes, all those kind of things. But they started using that as an exchange. That laid the foundation for the kind of monetary system that we have today. Eventually, they were able to perfect the art of making use of gold and silver as money by building coins that were equal in value and length so that they could become fungible. And that's when they started developing all the characteristics of money that we know today that most people actually don't know. So we're going to go into them. And like Stella said, I hope that you have a notebook somewhere where you can note them down, because it's going to be very important for you to understand these ones, right? So we moved on, and gold became the standard. It became money. Now, I want to premise this whole discussion on the following thing. Very, very important to understand. I'm going to give you a quotation by the third US president, who was a president in the 1800s. His name is Thomas Jefferson. This is what he said, and I quote, "Paper is poverty. It is the ghost of money and not money itself." So I'm going to repeat that again. So he said, paper is poverty, right? It is the ghost of money and not money itself. This is a president, the third president of the United States of America in the 1800s. This is a very long time ago, but even then they had an understanding of differentiating paper from actual money. Paper is a representative of money, but it's not money. It's like when you take your shirt to the dry cleaners, you get a receipt. When you walk around town with that receipt has no value. The value is back where? At the dry cleaners, your shirt, right? If you lose that receipt of yours, you can probably make an alternative arrangements with the dry cleaners to still get your shirt. But the actual value of the transaction lies where? At the dry cleaners, in your shirt. It's not on that paper. So back in the day, certain countries that started building the Industrial Revolution of the United Kingdom, they started needing to develop better systems. And I just want to note something that maybe most of us are not aware of. Central banks are a very new phenomenon in the world. They, like, you know, sometimes you may think that certain things have always been there. And then you find out that actually that's not the case. So central banks were not always around, but monetary systems existed even without the central bank, right? Back in the day, in the olden days, in the Greece and Roman empires, the government was the one that was completely in charge of monetary policy. And then eventually, as Industrial Revolution came and happened in the United Kingdom, as the American development of the economy started happening, they came up with newer and newer systems to control value. All right. So bankers of back in the day, JP Morgans, you will have heard that name, all those kind of people came together and had a meeting and then decided to start a Federal Reserve Bank, which was the first reserve central bank in the world. It was established in 1913, a year after the ANC was founded, right? So it was established in 1913. Understand that it was established by bankers, right? People who owned banks had a meeting, decided that they needed to consolidate their power, and therefore they are going to start a central organization that will make decisions about the market, the financial market. To do that, obviously, they had to buy the politicians so that they could agree and give them power, and then pass bills and laws that would be favorable to them. So they did that, and they built that organization. It has become what it has become today. Understand that the first big recession that the United States experienced, most people think it was caused by World War I, which happened around 1914, 1915. But in actual fact, deeper into economic history, you will discover that you will discover that the Federal Reserve had more to do with that one, because World War I did not actually take place in the United States, and the United States was not that involved in World War I like they were in World War II. This recession, most people don't think about, the one that happened in 1980, because it is the perfect recession. It's the kind of recession you want to happen in any economy. Why? In economics, there's something called a business cycle. There are booms and busts. There are ups and downs that happen on a day-to-day basis in the business cycle in every economy. They are expected. It's the way of the world. It's nature, right? It means that there are people who have done something in this business cycle that they were not supposed to do, and therefore the recession is correcting the system so that it's getting rid of the weak links, survival of the fittest, you remember that concept, and it's keeping the people who are able to put more value into the actual business cycle. So in 1918, there were a lot of people after the founding of Federal Reserve who were starting to borrow money, and therefore they got into debt. Back in the day, it was very rare for people to be in debt, and then when they were actually in debt, it was a very small percentage of the population. But then eventually the economy collapsed. The government did nothing. The government did nothing, right? Those people who had too much debt, those people who were running their businesses recklessly, they went out of the business cycle. Their businesses closed down, and their debt was destroyed. And then the people that remained in the system were people who understood the value that they were offering and who were always trying to do new things in their businesses to increase that value for people that were purchasing from them. So because government didn't do anything, anyone who was able to be innovative and do what they were supposed to do, people who saved as they were running their businesses, who bought assets and invested in the right things, were able to continue building their businesses. And that led to the best of the 1920s, the best period in the United States. Economically, everything was growing, people were making money. That recession lasted about 1.5 to 2 years max. But most people forget about it. But it was a severe recession. Most people went from being in middle class to poverty. But because the government let the natural laws of economics work, people were able to get out of that, jobs were then created, and people went back to living their lives, right? And then, once that happened, then the Fed saw an opportunity to start creating more and more debt, which at that time, by the way, if you wanted, just as a general information, just to juxtapose today's world with the past. Back in the day, if you wanted a home loan, you were required to pay 50% upfront, right? And you could get a maximum of $5,000 only from the bank. Those were principles that were put in place to ensure that people don't drown in debt, like today. Today, you can buy a home without having any money. As long as you have a credit record, they will give you all the money that you need, all the currency that you need to buy the home. Anyway, then it happened that what happened in the 20s, most people started borrowing money. Because it was nice now, the economy was back, going good. People started borrowing more and more money, and they started participating in the stock market. It was a new phenomenon then, the stock market, but a majority of people started participating in it continuously. People who didn't even have information about it, people who didn't even seek research and seek advice, proper advice, before they started putting their money there. Because their neighbor was doing it, because the guy who was brushing their shoes in the morning was doing it, they also started doing it. And that fueled a bubble that eventually led to the collapse of 1929, Black Friday, where the market just collapsed because it couldn't take care of it. It couldn't handle the amount of debt and credit that was put in the system. All right, so now that's one of the first and the biggest depression that we've had in modern history. We have had things that are similar back in the Roman and Greek periods, but because they were isolated to small empires, they did not reverberate across the world. The first one that most people started to feel the impact of was the 1929 economic crash. Why is that important? Because now it brought a very important aspect of policy in the world. Government started realizing that they need to participate in the market. They need to intervene, because that depression of 1929 was a huge deflationary process that was happening. And for a majority of people, it was the first time that they had ever experienced deflation. Most of them are used to inflation because inflation is the natural way of things happening in an economy. But deflation is very rare. And when it happens, it really destroys a lot of things. It's like punishment for people who were doing reckless things in the economy. So the government decided to come up with a new policy fueled by an economist. Reason why I don't want to be an economist, because they advise presidents. Every government has an economist, but they always make the wrong decisions. So this economist is one of the most famous. His name is called Maynard Keynes, and he came up with Keynesian economics, which is the economic system that we've been operating on as the world since then, right? He worked alongside the president of the United States, and they created a system where fiscal policy became a critical part of getting the economy out of the rut. So remember that business cycle. Instead of it correcting itself by natural laws of those who run their businesses properly and prepare for the future will be able to get out of this. Those who do not and do reckless and make decisions will suffer the consequences. The government was like, no, we are not going to let you guys suffer the consequences. We are going to create currency because we are the government, and we're going to give it to you so that you can take your business, pick your businesses up again. That's the first time we've experienced that kind of thing in modern history. So that currency was created, it was given to businesses. Even governments themselves started creating unnecessary projects, government works, just so that they could employ the majority of people that had lost their jobs as a result of the collapse of the stock market. So now you see Keynesian economics and fiscal policy becoming a part of the world. Now we move fast forward into the World War II. After World War II in 1944, a very critical and important meeting took place in the history of money. Again, countries that call themselves important, more important than most, met in the United States in a place called Bretton Woods to have the Bretton Woods Conference. Now, the Bretton Woods Conference was basically to establish how they were going to use money going forward after the war has ended. So they decided that gold has been something that we've been using for a long time. It has been the standard in the UK, in America, and elsewhere. Most countries have used it as money. We know it as money. That's where our value lies. People could own gold. Private citizens could own gold. But something very important happened in the US during the Depression. Gold was made illegal to be owned by private citizens because governments needed a way to create more money, which we call currency, but back then they were calling it money. They needed to create more currency to give to the businesses and also to build and create the projects that they needed to employ people. You can't do that with gold, right? You can't print gold. So gold is fixed. So for the government to be able to still maintain value in the currency, they had to ask private citizens to not own gold so that only the government could own gold. So then from there, gold, the price was set at $35 US. In 1944, an improvement on that system was all these countries agreed that what we're going to do is have something called the global dollar standard, where we are going to peg the value of the US dollar to gold and then peg all the values of all the currencies in the world to the US dollar. So that was an agreement that was made in 1944. It operated in that way until 1971, when President Nixon of the United States realized that during the period from 1944 to 1971, him as the United States government and his other partners printed money without looking at the number of gold ounces that they have in storage, and then making sure that whatever they print is equal in value to what is stored. When he looked in 1971, he was like, ooh, the number of dollars that we have circulating in the world are actually way more than the amount of gold that we have. And this came on the back of France having made an announcement. It's something that you can Google on YouTube. It's there. The president of France was like, you know, we don't like this thing of the United States having everyone's gold. So we would like our gold back, you know. Now, the president of the United States realized that if everyone starts asking for their gold back, we won't be able to give it to them because the number of dollars that we've given them is more than what the gold that we have in storage. So instead of letting everyone come and say, we want our gold back, then plan with his economics and advisors to say, let's just stop everyone from using gold at all, because no one really knows that gold is what is backing this currency. Most people go out every day to work for the paper, to work for the coins. That's the only thing that they know. They get paid in that, and they take that and they buy goods and services every day with that. So if we just unpeg this currency from gold, no one will realize. So they did that. And then that's when you started experiencing high levels of inflation from 1971 to today. So as you can see, almost every 40, 45 years or so, there's a new monetary system that comes into place, right? Okay, now let's park that. Let's define the characteristics of money and currency. So the following are characteristics which exist in both money and currency. So only money can be both, currency can't be. So money medium of exchange, meaning that it has to be something that I can give to someone and they recognize that it has value, right? And then they can give me either a good back or a service back. It has to be a unit of account, a very, very funny concept, because as you know, in mathematics, there is measurement, and money is supposed to be a unit of account, which means it's supposed to measure. But money is not that good of a measurement tool, because the value of money or the unit of money always changes over time depending on how governments feel. So imagine if the centimeters changed depending on how President Mugabe felt. Your height would never be the same. It will always change because today the government feels like we need to reduce the number of centimeters that create meters, you see. So nevertheless, money is a unit of account, so it is used to give value, to put value onto things. That's why you will see 5 and numbers on it. And then it has to be portable. You have to be able to carry it around, and it has to be durable. So it has to be strong, you know, to some extent, not too strong, but it has to be strong so that it's not easily destroyed. And then it has to be divisible so that you are able to make change. So if I give you some 100 rands, you have to be able to give me change back. That's the divisibility of money. And then it has to be fungible. Fungible is that the 100 rands that I have as Kitumete is equal to the 100 rands that someone else has in South Africa. Because we live in the same country, where the currency, where the government has jurisdiction over the currency, that currency has to have the same amount of value no matter where you go in the country. Now, that is money and currency. Those characteristics are characteristics of money and currency. The additional characteristic which makes a difference between what money is and what currency is the biggest thing today. It's the reason why we are sitting here today, and it's the reason why the world is transforming at the pace that it is transforming. This is the reason why companies, major institutions, major multinational companies are being obsessed with this space, because they're starting to realize that we have been missing this one thing that we didn't realize in money. And we understand today, we are being forced to understand that that is where the value lies. And the last characteristic of money has to be a store of value. This means that it has to maintain its purchasing power over time. And when you put value and money or whatever assets into it, over time, they have to grow. Now, me and you know that currency does not have that characteristic. Instead of being a store of value, it actually leaks away and destroys value over time. So when you have cash and you keep it with you, today it is more valuable than it will be next month because of something called inflation. Now, most people define inflation, even in economics, as the increase in the general price level. But I want you to look at it differently today. Most people think inflation is when prices of goods goes up. I like to view prices of goods going up based on the value of products, because it only makes sense that you pay more for a product because it has been improved. So a new iPhone, when it comes out, you pay more for it because they have put more things in it. They have improved how the camera works. They've improved the screen, the protection, all those kind of things, and you're able to get into water with it, while the previous one, you were not able to do so. You will be able to then pay more for that because there has been an increase in the value of the product. But inflation, on the other side, is when the product you were paying for, it's exactly the same as when you were buying it last week, but you are paying more for it today. Now, that is not necessarily an increase in the price, right, in terms of value. That is a decrease in the money that you are using, the currency that you have, right? So that understanding is very important for us moving forward. Most people say inflation is the increase in the general price level. I want you to view it the following way. it is actually the decrease in the value of the cash that you have, the currency that you have. Therefore, the price seems to be higher. But in actual fact, because the value of the 100 rands that you had last month has gone down, you need an extra 100 rand to get to the same place that you were last month to buy the same product. So that's why there's a difference between currency and money. You will see most rappers on their rap videos will have a lot of currency, you know, and most people will think they are rich. But if a rapper from Zimbabwe were to come onto his video and he will have currency in a wheelbarrow full of currency, most people will laugh because they will understand that even though this wheelbarrow is full of currency, we know very well that there's no value there, right? So that is the difference between money and currency. It is a very critical and important difference because it has led to a lot of fights. It has led to a lot of taking away of freedom from people. It has led to a lot of increase in the number of people living in poverty. It has led to a destruction of businesses. This is why today's talk is called Money as a System of Control. Now you will ask yourself why I termed it that way, because here's the following thing. If you take a look at the past 10 years and you just Google, most people, when they talk about Bitcoin, they will tell you about money laundering. Oh, that thing is going to help money laundering. It's going to help criminals, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at the past 10 years, if you just Google, who has paid the most fines for money laundering? At the top of your list is going to be banks, right? Recently, it's not a long time ago, JP Morgan, which is the biggest bank in the world, paid $1 billion in fines for reckless behavior when it comes to trading. 2 years ago, HSBC, 3 years ago, Citibank, they pay billions and billions of dollars in fines for money laundering every year. Now, if you've worked in a financial institution, you will know how strong they advocate for anti-money laundering policies, and they have them in the banks. Yet every year, they pay fines for laundering money when they have policies against money laundering, right? The best system to use to launder money is cash, ladies and gentlemen, because you can't trace it. So most people who claim that Bitcoin can be used for money laundering, they don't really have a leg to stand on because we already have a better system for that. It's called cash and banks. They do it much better than anyone can ever do it, right? So now, when we look at the issue of money and we say, why is it important? Why do I need to understand it? We work for money every day, and I don't like people who like pretending that money is not important, because once you study economics, you will find out money might be the most important thing to everyone in the world, because the invasion of the African continent by European people is because of money. It's because they want to take resources so that they can build things that they can sell, and then they can enrich themselves. Okay? People do human trafficking because of money. All right? And bad and horrible happen because people are in the pursuit of money. So we have to understand that money is a very important thing. Once we get rid of this issue of trying to be humble about how important money is, we can start having honest conversations about money and why we need to have money. All right? So now we've had people from the 1990s, after the gold standard was moved, money was being printed, countries were now experiencing inflation, currencies were collapsing, and you have seen what happens to a country when the currency collapses. The simplest example we can make as Africans is Zimbabwe. All right, so I'll ask you a simple question before we speak about Zimbabwe. When you are a rich person or a well-off person who has money, is it better for your neighbors to also be well-off or to be poor? Right? Logic would say it's probably better for you if everyone around you is also well-off. Because if they are not, they might be tempted to steal from you, right? Now, I'm saying this for you to understand that the economy is much better when more people are employed than when they are not. Because crime levels are lower in a country where people are working, where people can provide for themselves, than they are in a country where people are unemployed and where people are oppressed. All right? I'll give you a simple example. When I went to varsity in my first year, I was living in a place called Paarl in the Western Cape. I don't know if you guys have been there, but it's the most fascinating place. Paarl people park their cars. It's 99% white. Okay, the black people who live there is very few of them. Some of them only come in during the day to work, and then they leave at night. So one of the fascinating things that I saw is that in Paarl, there's no crime. Like if you go to the hospital to the police station in Paarl, it's the most fun place to be, because there's always jokes being told. It's people interact. It's like a club of some sort. The police station is not serious at all because there's no crime. People park their cars on the road and they don't lock them because no one is going to come and try to steal the car. It's a very fascinating thing that shocked me when I first encountered it, because where I come from, crime is the thing. You have to protect yourself at all costs, right, against crime. Now I'm saying to you that in that system, in that place in Paarl, those people are all well off. No one is jealous of someone else and no one is trying to take from someone else. So you and I today need to understand that for the world to be better for us, it has to be better for the next person. This is why I love network marketing, because network marketing says to you that for you to succeed, make sure that your neighbor is also succeeding. All right? And for me as a human being, that is the best system that we can use to succeed and go forward. All right. Now, let's now talk about the movement from money to this Bitcoin thing. The internet was born probably back in the 1960s, 70s, but no one knew about it. It was a very small thing. IBM, which is the first internet company that was ever built, was then created. It was trying to basically bring the internet to the people and to businesses. So they started building things that are called computers. Today we know them as laptops and cell phones. That's where they have evolved to be. The internet became one of the best and most important systems humanity has ever seen, because it allowed the interaction of people from across the world. And it basically created a highway of information. So people could exchange information much freely than they used to. And then one of the first apps in the internet is the email that was created about 1988, somewhere there, towards 1990. And back in the day, to send an email during that time, it took about 3 to 5 days. I think that's where banks got this thing of their 3 to 5 business days thing. So it took about 3 to 5 days for an email to be sent from one person to another. It was very, very slow. But today, it takes a split second to send an email. You send it now, no matter where you are sending it, whether you're sending it to someone from Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Canada, America, it's very quick, right? Now, the internet started developing in that way, and then we know some of the most successful internet businessmen: Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. These are people who started then being interested in building businesses in the internet space. Now, in 1992, a very unknown group of people called the cypherpunks was also saying, okay, this internet thing is very, very important. But we see that it has freed information. But one thing that we don't see in this internet space is the freedom of value. It would be very if we were able to take our power back as citizens and take money back from the government and the banks and own it ourselves. So they started thinking and finding ways of building such a system on the internet. Now, in economics, there's something that is called double counting. You don't want money to be counterfeit. Now, you don't want someone who has 100 rands that is not actually 100 rands, but it looks like 100 rands. You don't want someone who can give you 100 rands today, but when you go and try to buy with it at a shop, you discover that it's not actually the value that you thought it was. So in economics, the main challenge of these people building a money system on the internet was the fact that the internet is based on duplicates. When I send you an email, I'm not actually sending you an email. You're actually receiving a copy of what I've written on my computer. It's a duplicate of what I have on my side. So we can't have that with money. And everyone knows, when I send you money, I have to not have it anymore for it to have value. So if I send you money and I still have it, then it has no value, right? So that's the main challenge that these people faced by when they were saying, okay, we want to create this money thing on the internet, but we don't know how. All right. Anyway, so they started working on this thing over and over again, doing iterations here, iterations there. As the internet developed, we went into the .com era. Many businesses were built, many businesses collapsed. Again, the business cycle. If you do good, you are rewarded. If you perform recklessly and you misbehave, you will be crushed by the economic system. Those businesses that behaved well, those businesses that saved money, those businesses that invested in research and development were able to make it through the .com bubble, and then the economy grew that way. Now, eventually, in about 2003 or so, someone built something called BitGold, right? I can say that was the closest thing to what we now have as Bitcoin. But it still had problems, you know, it didn't satisfy the principle that it needed to satisfy for us to use it as the world, as a global currency. But then eventually, a group of people or someone called Satoshi Nakamoto built the perfect product we have ever seen on Earth, right? Now, let me say this. Why are we saying Bitcoin is the perfect product? Some people argue that Bitcoin is, we are reckless, it's not because we are disrespectful, and it's not because we are ill-informed. It's the following way. We know exactly what happens in Bitcoin. Exactly. Literally. We know that there are 21 million Bitcoins that will ever exist. We know how those Bitcoins are mined. We know how many are released into the system on a day-to-day basis, depending on which 4-year period we're in. But when it comes to gold, we are speculating that there is no more gold. We are not sure. Just like oil, most people thought, the only oil that we have is in the Arab Emirates. And then jiggy, you find that they discovered an oil in Botswana. Next thing, they discovered an oil in Nigeria. So now there's more oil in the market. Similar thing with gold. We never know whether more gold will be discovered in the future. That's why the gold system, even itself, has an inflationary problem. It's not much of a problem like the one that we have in the system of money that we use today, because gold and silver are still very, very good at being money. But the fact that you can't predict that this gold that we have today is the only gold that we'll ever have means that there is a better system than gold today, which is Bitcoin, because we can tell you exactly to the T what is going to happen in the Bitcoin system, in which year. You understand? So that's why Bitcoin is the best money we have ever had. So in addition to those 5 principles that I gave you, those 6 principles of money, you need to add an extra one, which means it's an uncensorable system. Okay? This characteristic is brought by Bitcoin specifically, that no one can censor Bitcoin, right? No one can stop the transactions of Bitcoin or the Bitcoin system itself. That's why this system has become so powerful, and that's why more and more people are seeing the value in the Bitcoin system. So now today, we have banks that can come and collapse an economy and then get rewarded. Because back in the day, when the economy collapsed in 1929, the same thing happened. So 2008, the banks do something that is very irresponsible. Now, you create a product in a bank. That product has a target market. That target market, those people have to have certain qualifications and criteria, satisfy certain criteria to get money, right? Or to get that product. Now you start giving them that product and you see that this product is making money. You are greedy, you want to make more money. So you start expanding the qualifying criteria, and you start putting people in that category who don't qualify to be in that category. Now, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, American banks started giving people money that they couldn't afford to borrow, just because they were making large interests on these things called mortgage-backed securities. Now, the more they started giving these people this, it eventually comes to a point where you know for sure that these people are not going to be able to pay back the loans that these banks have given them. That is what caused the collapse of the economy in 2008, 2009. The fact that banks borrowed people money that the people couldn't afford to pay back, right? Now you have to punish people when they do that. But the government didn't punish the banks because they said to themselves, it's going to be a problem if we let these banks collapse, because imagine letting HSBC collapse, imagine letting JP Morgan collapse. How many businesses around the world have loans from HSBC? How many businesses around the world have loans from JP Morgan? How many businesses around the world have insurance from AIG? So we can't let these businesses collapse. That's why you have the concept of too big to fail. So the government says we need to take money from the taxpayer, we need to give it to these bankers, so that these bankers can, I don't know what to do. I don't understand what the government's intention was when they were giving these people money, because generally it would make sense for you to have rules when you are giving money over to banks, to say, this is what you can do and what you can't do with the following that I'm giving you. But they didn't do that, they just gave them money. And then what did the bankers do? They were like, oh, okay, so we shut down the economy and then we get rewarded with more money. Let's give ourselves bonuses. All right. And then in 2009, another very important step in economics and in money happened, which is called quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is basically a fancy way of saying government printing money for no reason, right? They are assuming that there's a potential problem in the economy. See that businesses may collapse on that, so we're going to just print money, and then we're going to give it to the banks and give it to businesses so that they can stimulate growth, right? Now, quantitative easing has been taking place since 2008 to date. About 12 trillion approximately has been created in currency since 2009, and it has been given to different banks and different businesses. That is what has fueled what we have come to know as the greatest bull market in the world, right? Now, the problem with artificially increasing the value of things is that they collapse eventually. So when an asset, like I explained earlier, when you are buying an iPhone because it's much better than the previous version, you know why you're buying it. It has better functionalities. It has more uses than the previous one. You can actually see the things that you are paying for. But the problem with us, the stock market, is that because of people's feelings, companies can be valued at crazy numbers, even though when there's no logical explanation. Companies like Airbnb, like Uber, companies like Facebook, like Amazon, their value continuously grows exponentially, but they are not fundamentally changing their product. Okay? They are not improving their product or the value in the product that they have. It's just because the government keeps on printing more and more money and they're putting it into the market. That money has to go somewhere, right? Because they're creating more and more currency. That currency has to go somewhere, and it eventually lends itself in the stock market, and it eventually artificially increases the value of companies. Now, why did I say earlier when I started this presentation that we are living in the most fascinating time in financial history? It's because we are living in the greatest wealth transfer that we have ever seen. I've studied economic history as far back as the Roman Empire, as far back as Egypt. Nothing of this size has ever occurred in history, right? This is going to be very bad. I need you to understand that the next global recession that's going to happen will make 2008 and 2009 look like preschool. Because what is going to happen next when the economy collapses will be devastating. That's why it's important for you today to take the necessary steps to prepare for that time when it comes. For you to understand a concept that is the following is very important. Wealth is like energy. You can't destroy it, but you can transfer it. Now, in an economic recession, most people lose money, most people lose jobs, most people lose businesses. If that's wealth in economics, right? Those things are wealth. They are part of what creates wealth of a nation. Now, if those things are lost by some people, and I'm saying to you, wealth is like energy, you can't destroy it, you can transfer it. What does that mean? It means there's someone else on the other side who's benefiting from this. There's a very simple example. Again, this is why I actually love this year in some ways, because it has really, really revealed a majority of these things to us. You have a natural pandemic apparently hitting the world. Companies closed down, businesses closed down, countries closed down, everyone is running amok, they don't understand what's happening. And then you read the news. Jeff Bezos' net worth has increased by 2 billion overnight. Bill Gates' net worth has increased by 10 billion overnight. Warren Buffett's, you understand what I'm saying? So the destruction of wealth that is happening in the economic system where businesses are destroyed because they are closed down, they are not operational, is being transferred to some people who are prepared and are waiting for that wealth to come to them. Over the past 8 months, the richest 1% of the world have made more money than they did in the past decade. Because more businesses have collapsed, more economies have experienced stress over the past 8 months than they ever had in the past 10 years, right? Now, money as a system of control comes here. The people who control money, the bankers, are the ones who make you suffer. When these businesses are destroyed, when this value is lost, that money is directed to people who already have money and is taken away from you. Because money is no longer a public good, it's owned by private entities, which is again another important thing that I must state. Most people think that governments are the ones that create money. In actual fact, governments print about 5% of all the money in the world. The money is actually created by banks through something that is called lending. So you give the bank deposits and they lend that money to someone else. They buy a car, they buy a house, and then they pay the money back with interest. That interest thing is fake money. It's basically money that didn't exist before that now exists because you borrowed it. That's what creates the majority of the money that is in circulation in the economy, right? So now I see that we are 5 minutes away from 8 o'clock and I don't want to go over time. I just wanted you to understand where the history of money has come to and then where we are standing. So just having moved from all those and having faced the problems that we have faced, Satoshi Nakamoto identified that we needed to create a monetary system that is independent of these people who are reckless, which are the bankers and the governments. And we needed a more safer monetary system that could take us back to those days where we used to exchange amongst each other without anyone being the middleman, right? So Bitcoin removes the bank, it removes the country, because your Kenyan shillings only operate in Kenya. They don't operate in. When you come to South Africa, you have to exchange your Kenyan shillings to rands. When you move from South Africa to Nigeria, you have to exchange your rands to naira for you to be able to buy things in Nigeria. With Bitcoin, it is borderless. Wherever you go, you can use the same Bitcoin that we use across the world. All right? It's the perfect money. Now, 10 years ago, Bitcoin did not have a value. 10 years in 2010, while Philip was here in South Africa and we were in the World Cup spirit, Bitcoin was valued at about 5 cents. In 2011, it went to 300. It fell, went up again. Today, Bitcoin is valued at about 192,000 rands, just a single Bitcoin. Now, you have to understand, earlier when I spoke about the store of value, right? So since 2010, from 5 cents to 100, almost, let me say, almost 200,000 rands per Bitcoin. That means that you have the fastest growing asset in human history and the highest performing asset in human history. It has outperformed every single asset that we have in the world, from property to stocks to everything. We even saw oil going negative this year. Miracles have happened this year. But Bitcoin has stood the test of time. It has shown people that it has actual value. And that's why you now see companies running around trying to invest in Bitcoin. The reasons why these people are there is because we are now sitting in a place where companies have to find alternative way to put money, because governments are decreasing interest rates on a day-to-day basis so that they can try to inspire us as consumers to spend money because of this pandemic. Most people, when they see a pandemic happening, start to be scared to go out. They don't buy a majority of goods and services that are produced in an economy. So they will buy the necessary things that they need, like food and clothes, right? They will not spend on other things like vacations, tourism, and all those things. But we know how important those things are to contribute to the growth of the economy, right? Now we are sitting here today where government is trying very hard to encourage people to spend money, because spending money means that the economic machine continues to run. But the problem is that we are finding ourselves in a place where we are living in a global dollar standard. Global dollar standard means that every currency in the world is pegged to the US dollar, right? When the US dollar gains value, everything is good. If it loses value, everything is bad. We have, again, that's a unique thing about the history that we live in today. We've never been in a time in history where the one currency was basically in charge of everything else in the world. Like if the US dollar collapses, it's over. It's over for everyone, because even gold is denominated in US dollars. All the imports and exports that we sell as countries are denominated in US dollars. And in a deflationary period, you will see the value of the US dollar going up. And then if you don't understand economics, you will think that is a great thing. But again, most of us have never lived through a deflationary period, so we will never understand how it happens until it happens to us. I'm sitting here today trying to warn you and say to you that it is on the way. Don't wait for it to happen first and then try to make a plan, because trust me, if you wait for deflation to happen, you will not be able to make a plan, because you'll probably be living in the streets. It is that dramatic. I'm not just exaggerating. Once the next collapse happens, a lot of things are going to be destroyed. What happened this year with companies is nothing compared to what is going to happen when the crime that they've done in the past 10 years of quantitative easing down to be paid. When the chickens come home to roost, it's going to be very painful. People in the Bitcoin space are going to be fine because that's how people create wealth. A very simple tip for you. When a recession happens, Warren Buffett, you will see Warren, if you follow him, he has money invested in whatever. He likes airlines, he likes banks, he likes businesses that he understands, the products that he can consume, that he knows and understands, and he's friends with the owners and the creators, right? That's how he invests. Doesn't invest in technology, doesn't like it, doesn't care. But whenever something is happening, Warren will take money out of the stocks that he has invested in and then keep the cash. That's usually how you know that things are about to go wrong. You will hear in the news, Warren Buffett has taken money, he's liquidating assets, blah, 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 blah. That means that he is seeing something potentially happening in the economy. And then what he's going to do is to keep the cash with him. And then 2008 happens while he's sleeping there, living his life. People are crying, people are throwing themselves out of windows because they are out of a job. And then he waits a year and he knows all the great companies that were built prior to this recession will still exist after this. Like I said, you know the business cycle that I kept mentioning. If you build your business properly, it will withstand the collapse. So Warren will be waiting with his 10 billion or however much he has for that thing to happen. When it happens, then he goes back to the stock market and then he buys those companies for cheap because now the value of things has gone down because of a recession. Now, me and you, we need to acquire as much Bitcoin as we need to before the next recession because Bitcoin is better than gold. And for the first time in history, the big this year, apart from the coronavirus, is the following that no one has talked about. For the first time in the history of his life, his investment life, Warren Buffett has actually taken money out of banks. He's taken money out of airlines, and he's actually bought gold for the first time ever. Usually he will keep the cash because he still has that he died after the collapse. But that means that he doesn't even have hope for the future. He's like, yo, what is coming is a problem. Now I'm saying to you, this is one of the wealthiest men in the world. A man who's become wealthy not because he built a product, but because he knows history. He reads markets. He reads businesses. He reads governments and how they make decisions. And then he comes in and does what he wants to do so that he can make money. Him taking his money out of the stock market completely, out of things that he has relied on for so long, and putting it in something that he has criticized ever since he started investing, is a signal to you and I that times are about to be very difficult. Now, like I argued, Bitcoin is actually a better asset than gold or any other asset that is there around the world. So the more you have of Bitcoin, the better position you are in when the next collapse comes. You'll be able to take part in the wealth transfer that is going to happen. When it collapses, Facebook is a company that's not going anywhere. I can tell you that much. Twitter is probably not going anywhere. Amazon is probably not going anywhere. Alibaba is probably not going anywhere. There's a number of companies that are very, very good companies that serve a very, very big purpose in the world that are still going to be around. Now, when you have Bitcoins, you can buy those companies for cheap when all settles down, when the dust settles eventually. So that's basically what I was trying to bring to you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that I gave you some valuable information today. And just to close, I want you to just basically say, to basically provide you to that. This year has also given birth to a push that most of us were taking too long to take, especially the countries that are underdeveloped, which is buying things online. Because now you see people are in lockdown, people can't go anywhere, there needs to be alternative ways of doing things. So people need to start building new products. And we decided, because we have the most valuable platform in the world called Bitcoin, we have 10 years of history of it performing very well and being strong. We have seen that no one can hack it, all right? We have seen that the more people participate in the system, the stronger it becomes. So we are able to, like Bill Gates, like Jeff Bezos, like Steve Jobs in the 1990s when they started building businesses on the internet, we are able to say today we have the confidence to build a business on the Bitcoin platform. Just like Microsoft has a confidence to build a system on the Bitcoin blockchain. So today we are sitting here saying we are building RubyLux. We have built RubyLux on the Bitcoin platform, and RubyLux serves the following needs. When you participate in buying things online, your data is owned. Simple example, one of my favorite companies because of how the man has built it is Alibaba. It's one of the best companies. The story is amazing. The man is a hard worker. He's a visionary. He's innovative. The problem with Alibaba is the following. When you buy on Alibaba, you have to download something called Alipay. Alipay is the method of payment that is used in the Alibaba system. Now, Alipay is owned by Alibaba, which means when you put your details on Alipay, Alibaba owns your details. Something similar to Facebook, where Facebook has your details. They claim they don't own it, but as we have seen historically, they can actually sell your data to certain companies that need that data for whatever they need it for. And therefore, there's something that these companies remove from us as individuals, which is very important, and it's called privacy. When you come to RubyLux, RubyLux operates on the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, where you own your public and private keys. If you are a well-informed person and you listen and you attend training and you understand how Bitcoin works, you will not give someone your private keys, right? So when you own your public and private keys, you control your value, unlike in Alipay. Alipay is like basically having a credit card and you give a company your credit card details. They are in charge of that and they can do as they please with those details. Now, that is where the world is moving, privatizing people's data. That is one of the biggest movements that is happening. And we are glad to be one of those people who are in a platform that already secures us in that regard. So take this opportunity to understand and learn and expand on some of the concepts that I spoke about today and realize and understand that the future that we are going into is going to be very, very painful for some people. Some of you might be there if you don't listen and if you don't make plans. But for those who understand the world that we live in today, for those who understand what money is in today's world, who understand that money is actually non-existent today. We are only working with currencies, and those currencies are recklessly being run by governments and central banks. Then you'll be able to put yourself in a position where you can actually build a better future for you and your children. Now, we invite you to join us in building this revolution of creating the first global cryptocurrency mall on the Bitcoin blockchain. You are sitting on the precipice of building history. When Jack Ma started building Alibaba, there was about 22 people in a room, very, very small room that they were in. Those people believed in Jack Ma's vision. He didn't have money then. All he had was a dream. And he knew that he wanted to bring the internet that he saw in the United States to Chinese people. China has a population of 1 billion people. We are sitting here. I'm talking to people from Ghana, people from South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. We have a population of 1.1, 1.2 billion people. For you and me sitting here today, that means that is a potential market for the mall that we are building. We are not just sitting here for fun. I need you guys to internalize the importance of this moment. What we are building here, or what we are helping to build, is potentially one of the most important companies in the history of the world, the African continent, and most importantly, the history of Bitcoin and the blockchain. So take it seriously and then understand your why. Why are you here? Why do you think this is a great opportunity for you? Get clarity on your goals, look forward, and do everything in your power to make sure that every day you give someone else that advantage that we've given you here today, which is that knowledge of Bitcoin. And if that person wants to participate, give them all the options that are available. But at the end of the day, the one that we have is the best. Okay, thank you very much. You can go back to Silo. I hope everyone has a great night.